Monster reward with kings at 6 mugs. Hello everybody and welcome. During this episode I'm presenting you my strategy on how to deal with King Kong at the 6 mugs cash game table. Here I'm going through 3 different game scenarios, starting with the first example from under the gun, continuing with the second at the button, and finally ending the third in the small blind. Concurrently during this presentation, I'm using Spades Advisor version 2.0 on my iPad Air. Good, so let's keep it rolling. Here I'm starting from under the gun and receive the hand kings. Now it's time to enter these cards in Spades Advisor. Before declaring my bet, the monster hand provides the equity of 85% against one player, using the table's best ranked hand. After wagering, only a narrower range of even more valuable holdings is expected to remain. When deciding on every high-value pocket pair, it's very significant to understand how to protect the hand against all the other hands at the table. Basically, the more hands which are possible candidates to join the action, the more important it gets. The most successful target is to go heads up, without an all-in declaration, but with a pot as large as possible. You don't want low aces or low to medium pocket pairs in the race. And if they really want to remain, the price for playing has to make them feel uncomfortable. In this spot, there are 5 unknown following hands. When knowing your opponent's game approach or playing styles, or reconsidering the previously played hand samples, called hand history, it's possible to find the optimal bet size. With a bet of $3 or 3 blinds, the following game outcome can be achieved. In half of all times it leads to a heads-up game. In about a fourth of all tries, it results in 2 remaining opponents, where it's more likely that the last opponent squeezes rather than calls. Otherwise, in about a fifth of all hand samples, it all ends uncontested. In the remaining 20th part of experiments, something less predictable happens, like an opponent shoving his stack. This applied $3 opening raise is very often a nicely fitting bet for a relative tight table. When playing against many loose aggressive opponents who are regularly found in micro cash games on the internet, I'd often prefer a larger bet size. Something like 5 times the blind works fine. Thereafter, Steve folds his hand. Afterwards, Theo mugs his hand too. Subsequently, Nick raises the bet to $6. What's 2 times my submitted bet? Mario decides to give up his small blind. Thereafter, Boris doesn't want to play from the big blind either. This is what I have been waiting for. A nice re-raise builds the pot and only one player is left to defeat. Besides the fact that Nick, a tight aggressive player, made such a big raise to $6 is clearly an indication sign that he believes in being the favorite. His used hand range is certainly covered by using the top playing profile. He's continuing with an ace and a good kicker, or often with a dominated medium pocket pair. After choosing the top profile, all the drawing hands like Jack 10, Queen Jack, King Queen, Ace Deuce suited, etc. are not included anymore. As a result, the equity to win the flop gets only a bit lower than before. This is a clear indication for having the superior hand. With 82%, I'm post-flop on the favorite hand 4 times during 5 occasions. I won't re-raise his bet because Nick could easily shove. Of course, I would have to play then for my stack. After activating all-in in Spades Advisor, it's obvious that I'm losing lots of equity after an all-in declaration is made. With 69% to win the showdown, my chances remain quite intact. 2 times out of 3 trials is very profitable indeed. This is also the reason why Kings is almost always an all-in call, when there is no other option left. Why would I want to give my opponent 5 community cards to outdraw my hand, when I have the option to give him only 3 cards before betting aggressively further on, when the spot seems right? Believe me, this makes a big difference. Tendency of this hand play is to win less when playing versus very aggressive players, but to win more versus tight players, who won't easily call a massive pre-flop bet. A loose aggressive player does easily shove, sometimes even as bluff, where a conservative tight player is more cautious and needs at least a good reason or a top starting hand. But most importantly, being not overly aggressive, you lower the risk of getting outdrawn by an ace, what lowers the variance and gives you more control by seeing 60% of the board. This is why I disable the all-in switch again and decide to only make a flat call. The flop shows a 10 and a pair of 9s, with 2 spades on the board. After defining these 3 community cards in Spades Advisor, it shows me that in 85% of all tries, I'm winning the upcoming turn. Now I show you some examples for the opponent's starting hands. The first one given here in the lower right part of the screen is pocket 8s. The next one is pocket 6s, ace jack, ace king, ace queen, 8s, ace queen again, and jacks. When regarding the pre-flop bet size, the opponent could be either on ace king suited, ace queen suited, ace jack suited in spades. Besides, he could have hit top pair. What would be a 2 pair with the board given? Or he possibly possesses overcards with an ace high ranked hand. Furthermore, he could have any overpair like jacks, queens, kings, or aces. Also likely is that he has an underpair which is 8s or lower. Rarely he has turned the full house by playing 10s, and rather exceptionally he might be on quads with pocket 9s. This hand preserves its very good perspective post-flop. What's the reason to bet the pot? After that, Nick re-raises again to the double bet amount. This is the moment to represent strength with an all-in statement, which should bring nut draws or even overpairs to a hard decision. Most likely it will end uncontested. After enabling post-flop all-in in Spades Advisor, the equity stays almost the same. With 78%, this all-in declaration is much less dangerous than pre-flop. Furthermore, I feel confident that he wouldn't have re-raised an early position raise with ace-9, given how he plays such hands. More likely he would make the flat call of 3 times the big blind than 3-betting. Nick instantly gives up after seeing my shove. After subtracting my uncalled all-in bet, this means I end up winning the final pot of $65.50, uncontested. My starting stack grows plus $33.50 without taking much of a risk. The next time I received kings, after about half an hour of gameplay, I'm located at the dealer button. After the cards are defined in Spades Advisor, it shows again almost the same evaluated equity as seen before. Different here is the game's position, which does provide an overview over all players' game decisions, besides the small blind and the big blind. Nick opens from under the gun with a $3 raise. Thereafter, Mario lays down his cards. Next in turn is Boris. He decides to make a re-raise to $6. In this spot there are only 2 unknown following hands to include. The additional information to catch here is that 2 opponents are particularly interested in playing their hands. Nick doesn't bet an early position raise of 3 times the blind often. Nevertheless, this is the second confrontation during the same session. I hope for a déjà vu experience once more with kings. This time I expect that Nick could also start with a bit worse starting hands than before. Boris has been by far the most active player all around the table, but his re-raise to $6 clearly indicates at least a solid strong hand, like King-Jack or better ranked. During most of his hands, Boris called such $3 open raises regularly, but not so much made a 3-bet. The opponent's starting hand definition leads to the strong playing profile. Next I move on by defining this spot in Spades Advisor. The up returns that I receive 76% as my equity to win the flop against 2 opponents. That's fine, but my objective remains the same as defined before. It shall be heads up against a single opponent without a pre-flop all-in declaration. It's therefore a clever move to re-raise or 4-bet in this particular spot. By betting a massive amount of $16, I expect to receive some fold equity, and therefore most of the time not more than 1 remaining opponent. Nick and Boris are folding the bottom of their hand ranges, like King-Jack, King-Queen, deuces, trays, etc. And either one of them could finally find a top starting hand worth to continue. It's also possible to see a pre-flop all-in reaction, but that's by far better than running versus 2 hands. Otherwise, when neither Nick nor Boris owns a top starting hand, it could all end uncontested. My raise increases my likelihood to win the flop to 81%. Thereafter, Steve gives up his small blind. Afterwards, Theo also lays down his cards from the big blind. Nick decides that this is the right moment to mock the hand. And the last player remaining, Boris, makes the flat call. The flop is the ace, 8, deuce, all of different suits. It's a dangerous flop, what means that in about half the games I end up losing some cash against a pair of aces. Spades Advisor shows that the equity has been highly reduced to only 52% to win the turn. It's now only a coin flip to end up winning on the next street. Boris bets $35 into a $36.50 pot. His almost full pot-sized bet either represents an ace, two pair, or even a set. Because he bets much more than half the pot, I think he couldn't be bluffing here frequently enough. Therefore I get rid of my hands. It would simply make not much sense to bluff an ace after the pre-flop bet size has been that huge. As a result, Boris wins the $36.50 pot. His starting stack increases plus $20.50. The last time I turned kings was in the end of gameplay after a long session. I'm starting this time from the small blind. After entering the red kings in Spades Advisor, the evaluated equity stays almost the same as seen 2 times earlier on. Using the mixed playing profile is always the starting point for a relatively tight table before knowing the players' individual game decisions. Everyone until to my own playing position folds his holding, in sequence Theo, Nick, Mario, and finally Boris get rid of their cards. This is a special spot because there is only one unknown following hand left to include into the considerations, the big blinds. This is such a good spot for trapping based on the fact that Steve could play any 2 cards. With 93% to win the flop versus any 2 playing cards, I don't need to reveal my monster hand. The only remaining question is this: is my opposition punishing me for limping from the small blind? Steve is acting by far aggressively enough for believing that he wants to be the predominant better. Most often I believe that after limping from the small blind he would instantly raise it up. In order to put my mean plan into action, I only limp here. Therefore, I only complete the requested $1 amount. This is called a passive play, which normally indicates a poor hand. Steve heard my wishes, and he re-raises the bet to $3. Still, I don't want to reveal my real hand strength. For that reason, I wait a minute and say, oh, only $2 more. Okay, I think I do make the call. I don't believe you. You could have any 2 cards, right? The flop deals a king, ace, and 9. all of different suits. Again there's an ace on the table, but this time I hit the set. This is an amazing good-looking flop for my hand, and I really need to stay calm. Focused on the middle of the table and looking as depressed as doable. After entering the cards in Spades Advisor, it returns that the set of kings remains surely the favorite after drawing the unknown turn. There is no real danger in checking, besides a one-way Broadway straight draw hitting an out. But then again, remember I believe that Steve could be using any two cards. Therefore maybe he wants to blow me off the hand with 3 deuce suited. My next decision is very clear. Naturally, I do check again. This passive move is done as rapid as possible. Subsequently, Steve bets $5 into the $6 pot. That's almost a pot-sized bet and looks very promising. After thinking for another minute, I make a flat call. The turn brings another 9 and is very interesting. It not only pairs the board but also improves my hand to a full house. After entering the 9 of clubs in Spades Advisor, it shows me that the equity remains about as high as seen before. It's rarely 100%. Because only aces or nines are superior holdings. Hoping that the opponent has something good, like 9-8 suited, I instantly check again. And he clearly does have a hand, because he decides to make again an almost pot-sized bet. He bets $15 into the given $16 pot. Once more I slow down and make some imaginary calculation to show him how hard I'm thinking about it. Finally, after bitter sobs, scratching my head, grumbling something obscure with no real meaning, I'm ready to make the call. The river turns the 2 of clubs, and the dominated flush draw would get there too. Spades Advisor shows that there is absolutely no doubts in winning the pot here. Only another ace on the river could become tricky, but the 2 of club looks like a present. Like before, I check in a hurry, to make it look like I'm getting over it as fast as possible. I hide my real feelings and emotions about playing this hand. In order to do that, I ignore him completely. It doesn't matter anything what he has to say to me. An easy trick is to translate your opponent's question in the brain into a language which you couldn't speak naturally and fluid. In my case, I prefer French. But never ever answer him. He said something like, "Huh? You don't have a club in hands, right? Therefore only for you, my friend, I bet less than the pot this time." During this occasion he bets $30 into a $46 pot. That's 2/3 the pot size and a clear indication for a value bet. After his declared bet, I instantly re-raise him to $49. Doing so, I ignore him completely. This move smells like a bluff, but it doesn't need to. That's because of the $125 pot given. I strongly expect him to call, even with only a 2-pair or 3 of a kind holding. Before making this bet, there is no performance needed. Only 3 seconds are passed and found the optimal bet size, which he clearly has to call. After all, Steve invested too much into this hand to deny additional $19 to pay. What's less than a sixth of the given pot? Equally rapid, he says that he has to call either way. Doing so, he spends another $19 into the pot. After that, I show him my king's full of nines combination. Subsequently, he says that his hand played itself. He definitively couldn't do anything about it, other than keep on pushing. To provide proof, he turns over King 9 suited. And I felt something like empathy for his big loss. That's it. Enough reward for my kings. Thanks for your attention and have fun!